and welcome to my channel, Stories Unbound. I am your host, Zealous, and on this channel, we do book reviews. We do book reviews of fantasy, science fiction, a little bit of thriller, psychological thriller, horror, basically whatever book I find interesting enough to do a book review on and that I want to talk about. As you can tell by the intro, today's book that we will be reviewing is The Lost Apothecary by Sarah Pinner. First of all, this cover is stunning. Like, it's gorgeous. Just look at the colors, how they pop, the design of it. Whoever did the design, whoever did the cover, they did an excellent job. And the cover is actually what drew me to this book in the first place. I just thought it was so beautiful. And then once I read the back of what the book was about, I was sold. The writing of this book is absolutely amazing. It's really, really well done. It's very, very vivid. It really immerses you into the story. So I really love how Sarah Pinner's style of writing, I really love how she immerses you into the story. So this book takes place in the present day and in the 1700s. There are two main characters. There are three characters, but there are two main characters, Caroline and Nella. Is that right? And their lives kind of parallel each other, and I really thought that that was very, very cool that she did in the book, where the present day character and the past character's lives paralleled and mirrored each other, and they were in two different time periods. The other character that I really liked is Eliza, and she's the little girl in the book. I honestly found her story a little bit more interesting than the other two women's stories. I mean, Nella's story was very, very interesting, but I found Eliza a little bit more interesting than the other two women. I guess just how the story talked about her coming of age and how just the undertones of her coming into womanhood. But what I didn't like was, I guess because it was such a big part, that her coming into womanhood, or her basically getting her period, was such a big it was such a big part of her plot. But I really didn't like how the other two women in the story, like, they knew she was on her period. They knew. Well, Caroline's not even in there. Caroline's not even in the 1700s. But the women in the 1700s, Eliza, she has a mistress. So Nella and Eliza are the two characters that are set in the 1700s. And the story kind of follows how they meet. Eliza is looking for a poison for her mistress, and so she comes to Nella's shop. And Nella kind of gets this foreboding, kind of foreshadowing feeling about Eliza coming into her shop. So that is how they meet, because she needs a poison for her mistress. She winds up getting the poison from Nella. She winds up dispensing it. The poison is for Nella's husband, based off of, I guess, just some shady stuff he's been doing. Just like he's a shady person in general. And we're gonna get more into that a little bit later into the video. But the whole thing about Eliza is that she was coming into her womanhood, and she got her period right after she dispensed the poison to her mistress's husband, which her mistress wanted her to do. And so she thought that she was being haunted. She thought that the ghost of the husband was haunting her, and that's why she started bleeding. But the mistress saw that she was bleeding. Like, she bled on, it was like a couch that she was sitting on, or a chair that she was sitting on, and the mistress saw that she was bleeding. But the mistress knows that that's nothing to be afraid of. Like, she just had her period. She just started menstruating. And I was so confused and a little bit upset and annoyed that the mistress didn't just tell her right then that was natural, that she was just menstruating. She kind of just like flipped it off a little bit, but she saw how terrified Eliza was, and that, I didn't like that at all. I didn't like that at all. Further into the story, as you get into the story, her mission kind of becomes dispelling her mistress's husband's ghost from their manor. So she's looking for ways to get rid of the ghost, to like exorcise it, or however you do that. So she goes to Nella for like maybe a remedy or something that she may have. Nella winds up giving her a little magic book that she received a long time ago. So she winds up looking through that, but she said some references along the lines of her having her period, and I was just a little bit annoyed that Nella didn't dig further. Like, she didn't feel the need to dig further of why she felt like she was being hunted, why she felt these certain, I don't know. That part was just annoying because it felt like it was easily remedied, but I guess because it was such a big part of Eliza's plot that it was kind of prolonged of telling her the truth that it was natural for her to menstruate. Whatever. So overall, I did enjoy the book. I enjoyed the storyline, but the book for me didn't start getting good until about halfway through the book. I feel like that's when the action actually started. In the first half of the book, it lays down a lot of the plot of the story, but it feels a little bit slow, and there isn't anything really exciting. And there isn't anything really exciting that starts to happen until the middle of the book. Do with that what you will. And I guess this is just a part of how good Sarah Penner's writing is, like how well she describes scenes and what's going on in the book, because one of the things that I really did not like about the book, and I don't like this in general, the way people describe London. The way people describe London is absolutely disgusting to me. It's just gross. It's just disgusting. It's like the way they just describe the smells, the cleanliness, and I'm a germaphobe. I'm a germophobic type of person, and the way people describe London, I do not like it. I am not about it, and this was no different. And again, this might be because there was just like a lot of disgusting references that it took away from the book for me. I just did not enjoy that. It just gross. I guess that is also like paying tribute to how well Sarah Penner's writing is and how well she describes things, but the way y'all be describing London, I do not, I ain't going, cause, I'ma just read like a few lines of just the parts where I just really did not enjoy and just thought were kind of disgusting and gross. Well, first I'ma read a snippet from the book that was just really well done. Just, it really pays tribute to Sarah Penner's writing. The demon who decided long ago to crawl its way through my body, crunching and curling my bones, hardening my knuckles, wrapping its fingers around my wrists and hips, had begun finally to move upward into my skull. The way that she describes things, very poetic, very well done. It makes sense, and I could see it in my head. Like, I could see it, I could believe it, I could feel it. But the problem for me is when it gets to these kind of disgusting, gross moments where I feel like it's a little bit too overshare a little bit. So I'm gonna go to this part right here. So this right here, this is, there's another woman that comes into Nella's shop asking for poison, but this poison is for the mistress of her husband, which we'll get into that part a little further into the video as well. But so she's kind of retelling what happened when she dispensed the poison and it didn't go to the right person. So she's talking about the mistress. She goes, "Then I saw a ghost approaching from the corridor, the ghost of Mrs. Burkwell. Oh, how I nearly cried out. I stifled it, thank heavens. How strange that would have seemed to the dinner guests. But I soon learned it was no ghost. It was her in flesh and blood. I knew it by the mole on her neck, red and inflamed as though my husband's lips had just been on it." Is there anybody else that thinks that is just a little disgusting? Just, I knew by the mole on her neck, red and inflamed, like, ugh. Like, that type of imagery, it was just a little too much for me, and it took away from the story. And it's not like there's just one verse that is like that. There's just like a lot of parts where there's just descriptions that just seem kind of gross to me. Another one is, "Instinctively, I stood from the bed and rushed toward him. Oh my God," I said as I approached him. I could smell his sweat and something else, sweet and acidic. Ew. Ew. That is just disgusting. And there's just parts like that. Okay, this is the last one. I won't hold you hostage to these, but this is the last one. "I tore my eyes from the page. My damp, hot fingers had smudged the ink in several places, and the flesh of my inner arms and my groin was damp. I stood in the narrow alley between the two bins of rubbish, breathing deep, sucking in the odor of decay. Why? Why? And I know like these are just parts of the story, just to add the visuals and the senses to the story, but it's like it's just parts, like there's so many parts like this that just makes me believe like London is just such a gross place. Like it was kind of detracted away from the book for me, and that's just a personal preference. I just do not like, I don't like being thrusted into scenes where a lot of disgusting bodily fluids, smells, and stuff are. So that rubs me a little bit the wrong way, but that is just like that's just a small preference. But just know that there are a lot of parts in there where there is quite a bit of disgusting description, and it's not gore, but it is just disgusting as in people. Ugh. Also about this book is that there is an undertone of white feminism to me. There's an undertone of basically women supporting women just because kind of thing. All of the men, well, most of the men in the book are kind of in these opposing positions of authority. Even when she describes the police at the end, and this is still in the 1700s, when she just actually in the 1700s, Nella has a run-in with the police, and in the present day, Caroline has a run-in with the police. And the way all of these police officers are men, but the way that both of them experienced these police officers, because they were men, it was in a disgusting way. It was like they were portraying them as kind of disgusting, rude, all of this other stuff, and it just felt a little bit inauthentic to me. It felt a little bit inauthentic, and I didn't really understand. That took away from the book because it felt like there was no basis to the book. It felt like there was no basis. Kind of, they just had these beliefs just to have these beliefs, and it wasn't really any real reason. Part of the reason why Caroline and Nella's lives mirror each other is because they both have had bad experiences with their spouses. So Nella, she had a tragic experience, which I definitely understood. She had a tragic experience with her fiance or whatever poisoned her basically and took a lot away from her. So she's not able to have children. It kind of hurt her body in irreparable ways. So I could really understand where her pain was coming from, but I didn't completely get how it was translated. For instance, when one of the other women comes in who's trying to get the poison for the mistress, for her husband who's cheating on her, Nella has this big thing where she does not want to give her the poison because she doesn't want her to poison the mistress. Like, she doesn't want her poisons used on women. But I got this sense that she didn't want her poisons used on women just for the fact that they were women. And it felt like it didn't matter what these women did, even though some of these men these men that were poisoned mimicked exactly what this woman did. It's like she didn't want her poison dispensed on her because she was a woman. And it didn't make sense to me. I didn't really enjoy that. I didn't really like it. It didn't make sense to me. It felt like there was no basis to it. It felt like there was no basis to it. That's all I can say about that. And the other thing is it wasn't even a case-by-case study. It's not like, okay, what did this person do? Why would you want this poison for her? And then kind of judging based on her own set of morals of if she would dispense the poison for this person. It was just point blank period. None of my poisons are going to be dispensed to women, no matter what they do. But she never really asked what a lot of the men did in her book. She never really asked the women who came in for poisons what a lot of these men did. It was kind of just this assumption that we were supposed to assume that all of these men have done heinous things, like the fathers, the sons, the boyfriends, the dads, just whatever. We were just supposed to assume that all of these men have done heinous things to these women. And there were some heinous examples for sure, but there was also some examples that I felt paralleled what some of these women did. For instance, the mistress kind of cheating, even though her husband was the one cheating too, but the mistress kind of cheating. And what a lot of the men in her book, she has a big book that she keeps track of all of the women and the victims who fall victim to her poisons, and all the women who bought the poisons for these victims. It seems like some of the men have done the same thing, like they cheated, or they had extra people on the side. So it just felt weird. It felt very weird that it wasn't even a case-by-case basis. It was just, none of my poisons are going to women because they're women. It doesn't matter what they did. I don't want them poisoned, but I won't ask questions if you ask for a poison for any of the men in your lives. And I didn't really rock with that. That didn't make sense to me. You also had this weird thing of preserving the women who have used her poisons to kill the men in their lives. So again, she has this big book where she keeps track of all the women who come into her shop, what poisons they buy, and then who it's dispensed to. And she has this thing about keeping this book preserved, as in she's preserving the history of these women in a sense. But the thing is, these women didn't do anything significant but kill these men in their lives. So it felt weird to have this whole, history's not going to remember them because they're just housewives and girlfriends, but I will preserve who they are in this book. I will preserve it and protect it. And it's like, what are you protecting? I didn't understand what she was protecting. It was just a whole thing of these women were disgruntled. Some of them were done very wrong, like, don't get me wrong, but there was a lot of women who were just disgruntled and upset by what happened to them in response to like their husbands or response to the men in their lives, and then they decided to kill them with poison. And now you're kind of coveting this in this book, protecting their identities, or just protecting the book in general, and saying that it's a part of their history, as if these women were martyrs and they needed to be remembered as martyrs or such. I thought that was very weird. Didn't get it. And that's why I got this undertone of this very flat feminism, that it wasn't really feminism for the betterment of the woman. It was just feminism in a sense that I want these women just to do whatever they want, and I'm going to support them in them doing whatever they want, even if they do something terrible. So I didn't really rock with that either. What also confused me is that it felt like Nella did have a sense that what she was doing was kind of wrong. She felt guilty for the murders. She felt guilty for dispensing the poisons, and she even called them murders. She even called them murders of the men, and she felt guilty about it. So I also thought that was very weird, that she would have this sense of trying to persevere or preserve these women and make sure that their names are written down in a book so they could be a part of history or whatever. But in the same breath, it's like, you feel guilty. You feel guilty about your poisons killing these men. You recognize them as murders, so you know that there isn't really something good going on here. So that also confused me, because it's like you have the two emotions that she felt didn't click, of preserving these women and then seeing them as martyrs, and then being guilty about these murders and recognizing them as murders. I didn't get it. At first, during the first half of the book, I thought that Caroline was boring, and this is the woman set in the present day. She's going through some marital issues with her husband. So her husband has cheated on her, so she's flown to London by herself, which was supposed to be this anniversary getaway for the both of them, but she decides to go by herself so she can kind of get some space, clear her head. And she finds one of Nella's apothecary bottles, one of the bottles that she uses in her apothecary. She finds it when she's doing this whole mudlarking thing. And this is what sends her and spurs her onto this mystery of figuring out where this bottle came from, what it was used for. She winds up meeting Gaynor, which is a woman who works at the library. I believe the library. And she's kind of helping her, giving her this information, looking up information in newspaper articles and old stuff for her, so she can piece together where exactly this bottle came from. So the more she discovers, and the more she discovers this apothecary, and there was apparently the apothecary killer, she gets more intrigued and she starts really unraveling what actually happened back then with the apothecary and what happened with the whole mystery of the apothecary killer. So that's how her life kind of mirrors Nella's, is that she has a husband who has cheated on her, but she was also kind of unhappy in her marriage. And a part of her being unhappy was she felt like her husband kind of overruled a lot of her decisions that she tried to make throughout her life. It didn't really get exciting to me until halfway through the book, which is where more stuff started to happen. Like, she started to take more action. So she actually found the Lost Apothecary hidden in between the streets, down Bear Alley, hidden in between these two modern buildings, and it has never been touched, never been opened, because the apothecary is hidden behind a fake wall, so nobody has ever found it. So she winds up finding it and taking pictures of the book that was hidden in there with all the list of the victims, the poisons, and the women who bought the poisons. And she starts unraveling this mystery. Where was I going with this? Oh, what also parallels is that her husband also gets poisoned, but gets poisoned like from eucalyptus oil, from like an essential oil. He uses it the wrong way, he ingests it, and the police thinks that she poisoned him on purpose because of their marital issues. So this is how their lives kind of mirror each other. And because she has been doing research on this Lost Apothecary and the poisons that were dispensed from it, she has this notebook where she's been writing down notes about poisons and non-lethal things that can become lethal with the amount that you actually give the person. So this is why they think that she's a person of interest, of why her husband was poisoned and now in the hospital. And this is when I actually start to really like the book as a whole and the characters as a whole, because how Sarah kind of interweaves their stories and mirrors their stories and develops them is very cleverly done. The twists are very cleverly done. So I really like that. What I also kind of felt about the book, of this underlying, this very flat, one-dimensional feminism. Caroline, she starts to say that she feels this connection to the apothecary killer, and she feels this connection to Nella. She doesn't know that this Nella is her name, but she feels a connection to her because she was in the same spaces that she was in 200 years ago. So she found her lost apothecary, and she was just in awe that she was in the same space as this this woman who made all of these poisons and all of this other stuff. And it was just this whole thing of she felt this connection to her, kind of wanted to protect her in a way, but all she knew was that she dispensed poisons and that she was a woman. So that also rubbed me the wrong way, because it's like, why in the world are you empathizing with a killer, someone who poisoned people, and all you know is that she just poisoned people, but for some reason you feel this connection to her. You feel this connection to her because you were in the same spaces as her that she was 200 years ago. Like, that was just weird. That was just very, very weird to me. It fell flat. So towards the end of the book, as she's further unraveling the story of Caroline and Eliza, so once she gets these articles giving her more information about these articles from the 1700s, giving her more information about what happened during that time, the killer, some of the press releases that came out at that time, she finds out about Eliza. So Eliza was essentially an accomplice to Nella. She was kind of with her during that whole time, helping her make some of these poisons, even though Nella didn't want her there. And she was essentially an accomplice. So she was there when the police showed up and they were running together and all this other stuff. And one thing that Caroline did in the present day was the bottle that she had, she realizes that the bottle that she made, that it was one of the elixirs that Eliza made. And that's how it wound up in the river and how she wound up finding it. She takes the bottle and she takes it back to the same river, and she winds up throwing the bottle in the river. And to her whole reasoning is that she wants to protect Eliza. Protect her from what? I didn't understand that either, because it's like she just figured out who Eliza was. In the story, she didn't know about Eliza the whole time, but she knew about the apothecary killer. Once she read one of the articles, she saw Eliza's, I think it was one of the articles, but she winds up seeing Eliza's name in one of the articles, and that's how she figures out who Eliza is. So it's this big question, who is Eliza? So once she figures out who Eliza is, for some reason it's this thing of protecting her too. Protecting her from what? And the thing is, it's not like I wanted her to go out and just tell everybody their names or just tell them what they done. I wasn't really thinking in that perspective, but the thing was, her whole thing was just protecting them. And for me, it was like, protecting them from what? They dead. They are dead. They dead. There is no protecting them from anything. I guess just protecting their information or what really just happened back then. But her whole thing was protecting Eliza. She just figured out who Eliza was. And she don't even really fully know what Eliza did, but it's this whole thing of protecting her. This girl's priorities was just weird, just very weird to me. Overall, I give this book a 3.9 out of 5. It was a really good book overall. I really liked the story. The story was good towards the end. The surprises were pretty satisfying. How she wrapped up the story was pretty satisfying. If you can relate or you enjoy stories, well, not enjoy stories, but if you can kind of relate to the whole cheating, infidelity kind of storyline and this ideal of flat feminism or a white feminism of just supporting women just for the sake that they're women kind of thing, no matter what they do or what moral or ethical lines they cross, you will probably enjoy this book. But if you can't really relate to those themes, then you might not enjoy it as much, or you might not care for it as much. It can come off as unrelatable. The story itself though was actually really good. I really enjoyed the idea of an apothecary killer, and I wish that it was more of that. The story was that, but it wasn't a lot of that. I don't even know how to explain that. The overall story was good. The idea of an apothecary killer, of there was this lady in the 1700s who dispensed all of these poisons to people to kill people. I really enjoyed that story concept. So seeing those parts in the book, I thought were really, really satisfying. It's just the surrounding themes of the book and with some of the characters I found a little bit questionable and kind of took away from the book for me. It wasn't very thrilling or exciting. I wasn't like, wow, this thing happened. I thought a lot of the things that happened in the book were very, very clever, but it wasn't all too thrilling or exciting for me, but it was enough for me to finish the book and complete it. So again, I give this book a 3.9 out of 5. Very well written. The cover, absolutely stunning. Sarah Penner, her writing is absolutely gorgeous. So that is my review of The Lost Apothecary by Sarah Penner. I will be doing another video where I will be trying one of the recipes. So this book comes with recipes, and I thought that was interesting. I thought that was cute and that was interesting. There are recipes at the end of this book. In my next video, I'm going to go ahead and try one of these recipes and see how it turns out. Try one of these killer poisonous recipes. If you're interested in that, stay tuned for more. Subscribe to my channel. Go ahead and comment below. Have you read this book? Did you like it? Did you like the themes? Did the themes kind of make sense to you? Let me know what you thought of this book. Super excited to do more book reviews for you guys. I have a whole list of books that I'm just dying to get into. So I can't wait to share my thoughts on those books. And you guys let me know if there are any books that you want me to review, any books that you recommend that I could add to my list. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.